All right, everybody, welcome back to the Capital Call podcast. I'm your host, Vijar Kohli. On this episode, we have Anjan Lahiri, a former founder of MindTree and Birlasoft. He's a close friend of Thai, New Jersey, where I'm a charter member, and we met a couple months ago at an event that he hosted. And did an amazing job covering the IT industry and his story. So on this episode, we'll cover technology services, IT outsourcing, and his thoughts on the marketplace. Welcome, Anjan.
Thank you, Vijay. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So why don't we go into your background of where you started in the U.S. or in India, and then what you kind of quickly did your chapters in the world of IT outsourcing as it's evolved over the last 30 years.
Sure. Thanks, Vijay. Great question. In these modern times, I mean, not the current times, but the modern times, very difficult to say, where you're from. You said India, US, where am I from? It's pretty much global or nowhere. I started from India. I worked in Wipro. Then in 1991, I came to the US and I worked with a company called Cambridge Technology Partners. 1991, India liberalized. So there was a huge difference between pre-91 and post-91. I worked with Cambridge Technology Partners. There I got into high-level consulting and the IT space. Then along with some ex-colleagues from Wipro and my then current colleagues from Cambridge, I co-founded MindTree in 1999. MindTree business plan was written in my house. I was the only guy in the US at that time, had a great time, set it up in the US. Then I moved to London, set up MindTree in Europe. Then in 2008, I went back to India and I led MindTree globally, the services business, for 5 years. And then I had a bit of an itch. So actually I bought into a company and then a public company, and then I became the CEO on a turnaround job. I did that it didn't completely work out the way I had planned, but I had a great experience. And then I picked up Birlasoft in a turnaround job. And I was there for the last 4.5, 5 years, had an absolutely phenomenal time. A copybook turnaround, picked up a company in a certain state, left it in a state that I felt satisfied, comforted, and all was well. So that's my story in brief, Vijay.
Excellent. So let's go back into the Wipro MindTree shift. So, the industry hasn't really changed when it comes to servicing much. But the products and the customers, obviously, demands have changed. What shifted in your mindset to say that we have to jump out of Wipro? They're obviously were relatively large at that time too, and they were one of the early guys in the game, so they were definitely a leader. So what caused you guys to say we could do something better or different?
So it's your question itself has so much information in it. It's so interesting because you say Wipro. Now realize, and I mentioned India before 1991 and India after 1991. In 1991, when I joined Wipro, it was a $2 million company.
Yeah.
It had about 600 people, and there was no outsourcing allowed. There was no telephones in India to speak of. So there was no outsourcing. There was no software. You couldn't export. So Wipro in those days was all about hardware. And India used to make its own computers. So our main job was to write software, the operating systems for the computers that we actually designed and then sold, including small mini computers. So here I came and joined a company called Cambridge Technology Partners, which was the hotshot consulting company at that time. Yeah. And the reason I left India in 91 was I saw absolutely no hope in the country. This is not going. I said, this is not going anywhere. And how wrong I was. I got to go to the land of opportunity, which is the US. That's how I landed up here. And Cambridge was this phenomenal company with a market cap in those days of about 7 billion, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
So suddenly we had a $7 billion company, and we used to, quote unquote, look down on all the Indian outsourcing companies, which were, to give you some idea, in the year 1999.
Yeah.
If everybody listening to this podcast, just gives it a thought, Infosys was a $62 million company.
And it might be 60 billion now.
Yeah. And the market, so actually you're right, because TCS was a $100 million company, and currently TCS has a market cap of 100 billion.
Oh my God.
So to give you, you asked me what has changed. What has changed is in those days, the entire Indian economy would have been about lesser than GE,
Yeah.
the GDP. And we used to look at all these global companies and say, my God, how big it is. But today, the combined market cap of Infosys, TCS, Wipro, HCL will be more than the combined market cap of IBM, Accenture, Capgemini, and Atos Origin. So that's what's changed. That's pretty significant. Pretty significant.
That's amazing. So then you guys went from hardware to software. What was the shift in the MindTree mindset?
So imagine there was no shift in mindset. It was all about survival. So 1991, very important. So if you look at the entire outsourcing industry over the last 30 years, a couple of dates are important. 1991 is important. 2000 is important. And 2008 is important. So maybe I'll just talk about these three dates. So 1991, as I said, the business in India was all about making your own hardware and writing operating system software. So we were very good at, for example, porting operating systems from one microchip to another. So Intel will come up with a new chip and you'll port the operating system, which is mainly Unix, from the old chip to the new chip. And you'll do that. So 1991, but nobody was allowed to travel. You couldn't come to the US, you couldn't sell. So 91, when the India liberalized, suddenly import of hardware was allowed. So these computers started getting imported into India, and they were much better. And they also worked. What we used to make really didn't work all that well. You needed it was like a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. You needed an engineer to go with the car to make it work. So the computer started getting imported into India. So suddenly all these people who had a job writing software for the operating systems didn't have a job. So then people realized that, hey, we don't have a job here, but there is somebody making the computer out in Silicon Valley. Maybe we can go there and ask them if they want these skills of Unix porting skills. And that's how the initial outsourcing industry started, because Indian software people knew nothing about the enterprise. They didn't know how global banks work, how pension funds work, how retail industry works. But they knew how to port software onto a microchip. That's how the initial industry started.
So that really brings up a good spot to transition. So, today's world talks a lot about SaaS software. That's a lot of front end user experience stuff. And the computing power has changed over the last 20, 25 years. So, a lot of the outsourcing world spends their time on enterprise clients that are not doing the same type of computing that a startup would do in the last 10 years. So there's a lot more front end on what's in the news today, but a lot of what happens in business happens on the back end. So the databases, the actual hardware. So what actually goes on? What do the enterprise clients really need help with that is behind the scenes that customers don't see?
Very, very, very deep question. I'm trying to figure out how to simplify my answer. So if you look at entire software, I'm not talking of the product software, I'm talking the enterprise space. That means software that a company like Nike will use, or a company like Walmart, or just pick a company, right? So at a macro level, I think there are two kinds of software. So one is software that you need to run your own company, run your payroll, pay your employees, figure out how much you're shipping, figure out the cost of your item, et cetera, right? So that's run. And the other is, which is newer, is software which is your company. Okay. So that's an Uber or a DoorDash or whatever that is, right? So even a Uber or a DoorDash need software to run their companies. So either you need software to run your companies, or the software is your company. So what has happened is, software is your company is a new area of software, which is pure expansion. It didn't exist 20 years back or 15 years back.
Right.
So if you see this huge increase in the need for software people, it's not because suddenly the world global economy is so much bigger, but because suddenly so much more is being done by software. So what has changed? You mentioned SaaS, you mentioned all of that. So the cost of producing software has come down dramatically. The cost for two reasons. One is the sheer shift to offshore was a massive, had a massive impact on cost. To give you some idea, give or take, let's take the global enterprise software industry was about 800 billion. And it's approximately grown at about 3% a year over the last 20 years, approximately, right?
Yeah.
So 20 years back, in the year 1999, India exported $1.5 billion of software. 1.5 billion. So out of 800 billion, 1.5 billion doesn't count.
Yeah.
This year, this 800 billion is now maybe a trillion. India will export $200 billion.
God.
Okay. Now realize that this is in dollars, not in terms of effort. Right. So let's assume that a software exported from India is cheaper. Let's assume that it's at least half the cost. It's probably a little more than that. If it is half, then $200 billion of India exported software is equal to $400 billion if it was not.
Right.
So the impact in that trillion is actually 400, about 40%. 40% of the effort impact is what has happened. So cost of delivering software has come down.
Yeah.
Now combined with that, SaaS and cloud has dramatically reduced the infrastructure costs and speed. So combined with that, that doesn't mean that people have reduced the amount of money they're spending on software. They just increased because now they're doing more things with software.
Right.
So great times to be living in, actually. Forget about COVID, but great time.
So where's this 600 billion? Where's the rest of that money in the industry being spent? If it's not in India, which being Indian, I always think that we do a lot more of it, but where's the rest of that money being spent? Where is it being outsourced or insourced onshore in the US?
So those are the US on-site people who are working inside the companies. The Accentures and the Wipros and Infosys who are all also doing it here. So this 200 billion is just exported from India as opposed to delivered in the US. So it's still, the majority is still outside of India for sure.
Got it. Okay, got it. So let's talk about the economics of the business, how it works, what's changed. I'm sure the margins have been tighter. And then I'd love to go into how the sales process really works in the business, because from an outsider, it looks like a commodities business, but there's definitely, it's more people oriented than it seems internally.
Yeah.
So,
no, I think it has evolved enormously. I've been in this industry throughout my career, pretty much. I've seen it right through. So I told you there were 3 dates that were important: 1991, 2000, and 2008. Let me just explain based on that.
mm-hmm.
In 1991, when it first started, it was commodity, and the commodity was ability to port software and know how to program a microchip. It sounds very esoteric, but technically you can train people and they know what it is. And the key thing there is so what is the difference between a skill and a service,
mm-hmm.
right? In my view, I can give many analogies, but difference between a bricklayer and an architect. So bricklayer will lay the bricks, architect will tell you what bricks to lay. It's as simple as that. So your skill with porting software, you didn't bring anything. Somebody told you, okay, take this and port this.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, I got it done, all right? So this was all on the technology side. Then as we moved towards 2000, the Y2K came along, and that was again a skill. Y2K, YY, converted to YY.
Yeah.
Go through, right? So now Y2K was a big push, but realized that through this Y2K, people started learning about the enterprise. So when you are looking at COBOL programs, YY to YY,
right.
you're beginning to read their shipment data, their employee data, the factories, the organizational structure, which was not the case before, because before you were just doing the porting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the difference between technical software and enterprise software at a simplistic level is, in technical software, you interface with machines. In enterprise software, you talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Yep.
So here, when I'm doing YY to YY, I'm talking to the HR head,
right,
trying to understand the programs, because realize it was not just the YY to YY. but it was about finding out, how many programs you have. Okay, you have 2,600, out of which you actually use only 260 on a regular basis. The balance, 150 have to be junked. So which has to be junked? You'll go through it. You'll come up with a statement. You'll go to the HR head and talk to them. You're beginning to learn about the business.
Yeah.
So now comes 2000 and Y2K is done, and it is a superb success. And all the planes are flying. All the ATMs are dispensing cash. Everything is looking good. Along with Y2K has crept in two things. One is the internet has crept in. A mosaic came around, I think, 1994. Slowly it started building in, and everybody right now, by 2000, everybody has an internet.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody might not yet have an intranet.
Right.
They have an internet site.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're beginning to build intranets, and suddenly they need to build extranets communicating with their suppliers and their customers. They haven't done that.
Yeah.
Suddenly there's a huge lack of people to do that. And all these Y2K people, sort of customers knew they've sort of come from India. They didn't care where they came from. Saying, hey, you know what? I need to, can you do this? Can your company do this? Yeah, but I need to go back to India because, my husband is there, my wife is there. All right, why don't you go back to India? Because now you know my business, and why don't you do that? And then the company started selling, saying, hey, we got Y2K, but we had the guy who knows your business, and hence that said, that they call, penetrate and radiate. And so penetrated through Y2K and started radiating into the other business areas. I'll stop very soon. Along with this came ERP. So one was this extranet and intranet, and around this, when people said, I don't need so many covert programs, I can replace it with an ERP. The demand on people just increased so much. And then, of course, in 2001, there was a bust. So people wanted to save money. Yeah. So suddenly there were people and cheaper. And by this time, of course, the telecom industry came in. So the cost of telephones came down. Internet became available. It was a golden year from 2000 to 2008. And we'll talk about 2008 later.
Yeah, you brought up the telecom industry, which I want to mention later about the investments that Jio and Reliance have had in India. I think it's going to boost a lot of the global infrastructure. But let's talk about then the 2008 shift. What really flipped? It looks like, software obviously picked up, AWS and a lot of other things. Like Salesforce also, that 2003, 2005 timeframe really changed that ERP, CRM system. And I think the heart of all these companies said they need to figure out how to make technology the core of their business to stay ahead. And that really accelerated a lot of things. A lot of these companies changed their business model essentially. So what really, what industries did you focus on, and what services did you say that this is where we're going to head when you got into Birlasoft? Like, where was the opportunity at that time?
Yeah. So, I have a deep theory. Is that no company needs another line of Java code. There's nobody who needs any technology, right?
Yeah.
So you and I don't need Zoom.
Yeah.
We need to talk to each other.
Right.
Zoom happens to be the medium which is allowing us to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So nobody needs another line of Java code. They need higher revenues and lower costs. That's what they need.
Yeah.
Now, technology started coming in, helping them do that. So the companies suddenly realized that they could use technology not to just enable their business, which is what technology used to do before.
Yep.
That, hey, you know what, I need to set up this new factory. Technology set it up for me. But they can use technology to improve the efficiency with which they do their business. That was a huge shift. That was, not because technology was this marvelous unknown, magic which used to do the stuff that they needed to get done. Yeah. Suddenly, that magic became, accessible. And they said, "Hey, I can improve my efficiency." So, two steps. So, one is they wanted to improve the efficiency of how they ran their own companies. Mm-hmm. Then they wanted to improve the efficiency of how they interact with their customers. And at the third level, wanted to improve the efficiency of the entire industry. If you look at it.
What was the first one?
So first one is improving the efficiency of my own company.
Okay, so employees.
Everything to do with my operations.
Yeah.
How I produce stuff, how I ship it, how I sell it, how I pay my people, how I pay my customers, all my internal operations.
Yeah.
I want to improve that efficiency. Then I want to improve the efficiency of my interface with my customers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the third is, which is a small sliver, but that gets the highest, multiplier, is how do I improve the efficiency of the industry? So Bitcoin is improving the efficiency of entire industries.
Got it.
Or Uber is improving the efficiency of the taxi industry or the mobility industry.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the three things that changed. So 2008, what happened at a macro level, while all these technology changes were happening, I told you that from 2000 to 2008, people just discovered India, and everybody was trying to go to India and set up shop or work with somebody. Then 2008, the bust happened, which was a serious bust, and suddenly people have been saving money from 2000 to 2008, and now they had to save a lot more money. By this time, the offshoring vendors have started coming up in skills. It's not a commodity anymore. They understand the business. They are part of the organization, and people said, "Hey, I don't need to do all the designing myself. I don't need to do the business requirements myself." So gave it off again to the offshoring industry. So they became even more core to the industry. So from 2009, of course, there was a dip, and people started coming back. By 2011-12, it's back. So from 2011-12 to now, I think the Indian industry is far from a commodity. They are deeply embedded. No conversation in the business, in the global organizations can happen without the inputs from this very, very critical team. I think it has come sort of leagues in the last 2 years.
So we're at the fourth chapter then of that decade, right? We're like this coronavirus and everything that's happened in the last 3 months has really created that catalyst that was similar to the last three that you mentioned, last three chapters. And this virtual environment is going to accelerate it. So where do you see us now going, especially specifically in outsourcing and freelancing and anything else that's modular like that? In the next decade, like what services do you think are going to pick up? Which industries do you think are going to become stronger or weaker over the next 10 years?
Very difficult to say that. Of course, there are so many people opining on that right now, so I'll not even tread there. But of course, we see what's happening in our world. We all heard about the Great Depression. We thought, okay, fine. It's like I was about to say it's like the plague, which we'll never lived through before, but I guess we are living through something very similar to that, with much better healthcare and knowledge. So I'll not go there. But, again, as I said, 2000, 2008, and 1991, and I think we absolutely have to put 2020. Of course, everybody will put 2020 in the whole, and so suddenly, there are 4.5 million people in India who work in outsourcing directly, who are software engineers, 4.5 million. Within a matter of a week, India moved 4.5 million people to work from home. Unprecedented. And we're not talking about South Korea, we're not talking about the US, we're not talking about Europe, we're talking about India. So it means many, many things. It means that people had a place in their house with an internet connection which worked. It meant that the Indian internet traffic kept up at home. It meant that there was enough security software at every node to not, because of course people are paranoid about security. Let's say of this entire, at least 30% is with banks. At least 30% of the financial institutions. So from what I hear from everybody is that the outsourcing relationship between the outsourcer and the outsourcee has only become one of more interdependence and almost gratitude on both ways. At one level, one is grateful that we are in an industry that can actually continue working under these circumstances. On the other hand, there are very few organisms that could react so efficiently, noiselessly, in such a short period of time. It is absolutely astounding, and I think the reverberation of that, the echoes of that really fundamentally change. And how it will change is, we'll change the way we think about teams.
Yep.
Previously, the team was, hey, do you have a team in New York or in Bangalore or in? I think we will suddenly say, like in the in the academic industry, people, you read academic papers, and one guy is in Shanghai, one guy is here, one guy is there, and you think, how did they work? In software, we can't think that way. But now I think we'll have moved and saying, hey, you know what? Teams can be anywhere. What we can do as soon as cities will become a little less relevant, because cities were where people with multiple skills came together to do something that could only be done with a lot of people collaborating. Now, certainly, if people can collaborate from anywhere, you go to the best person anywhere they are,
right?
As opposed to them coming to where you need them.
Yeah.
That will change the type of innovation and collaboration that is possible, and services that can be delivered effectively and efficiently, I feel.
Yeah. So you mentioned one piece that in American companies have definitely, I've seen this, is the call centers and customer service centers, either onshore or offshore, definitely felt the pain in the 2-3 week transition to go from a work environment to a home office environment. Now, you mentioned this in India about the hardware to software switch in the 90s. The geo-reliance deals that have taken place, to the extent you can talk about it or about it, the infrastructure investments, what is the need for the global economy to invest in India's infrastructure so it could become better at doing the services it's done? What was lacking before, and what will be improved going forward?
So again, I know just as much as anybody else reading the newspapers. I have no, but let me just, give a factoid. So Uber or Google, when they started, my numbers might be a little off, but their initial round of funding was, some 5 million or 2 million or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So how much money does a startup need to start? And of course, we have heard of these SoftBank funded companies with $1 billion funding, et cetera, et cetera. Geo spent $20 billion. There is no startup in the world. This is before they had $1 in revenue.
Yeah.
They spent $20 billion laying fiber optic cables across the entire country.
Yeah.
Unbelievable where they got their money and where they got that, just gumption to invest like that. And the whole purpose was that India has no infrastructure, as we all know, and it's going to keep leaping. So there's no landline infrastructure in India, but the cell phone infrastructure is everywhere. And now the fiber optic infrastructure is everywhere. So the whole idea was that if I can own the infrastructure, then I'll own the people, and then I can own the services on top of that. So unbelievable investment, which went into fundamental infrastructure, which other countries, typically the country does or somebody else does. Geo just went and did it by their own muscle, which is incredible, absolutely incredible.
So you think the available workforce will 4 or 5x now if everybody has access to better internet over there?
That's a so the accessible workforce, will it increase? Because of course we know of Bombay, Delhi, Chennai, Bangalore. I'll have to put my hometown Kolkata also, which I know lags behind industrially quite a lot. But there are at least 100 other cities. Belgaum, Gwalior, Jaipur, Vijayawada, Varanasi. So, and these are all places. India doesn't lack young people with good education. It just doesn't lack at all. So all these people, will they join the workforce? I think suddenly the opportunity exists. So suddenly, will there be these big office places or large number of very, very small office places all over where people come? I think there's going to be a massive shift in terms of access to skills and capabilities all across the world, but particularly in India, because we are already in the digital economy. We're already serving the digital. There is no other country which does so much of digital work than what India does.
Right.
So I think it'll be a change.
Yeah, I believe it. Today I think we have roughly 25 million software engineers or people that are in that world. Um, doing investments like that number could be 250 million within the next 10 to 15 years. And those numbers are going to come from India and China and the rest of Asia. The US can produce a couple million and people in the workforce, but those numbers are really going to come from large
No,
populations.
absolutely. And I think the need to move from your village to your town, from your town to your city, and from your city to another country will come down. Um, so I think there's a change.
So do you have any advice for anybody that's starting in the industry or looking to actually launch their own outsourcing business?
So that's very difficult advice. Obviously, I'll not go there, except to say two things, right? So one is any time of disruption is a time of opportunity. Everybody says that, which is probably true. Many great companies have been started in times of strife. But if you also, and that's the good part, the sobering part is, I was reading an article based on analysis of data. Um, Fewer companies started during strife, survive, which is so the chances of you surviving at a macro scale is higher when times are slightly better. So I think um, uh, next year and a half, 2 years, God knows how long, will be a slightly difficult. So times of opportunity, so you need to look at it. At the same time, your margin of error for making mistakes is lower. When water is coming, the tide is coming, boats are lifting, your margin of error is higher. You make a mistake, you'll still sort of rise. But when things are not that great, water is coming down, and there are these shallow paths there. You take the wrong path, you get stuck. So the opportunities are there, but be careful about your arrogance a little bit, because you won't be able to make as many mistakes as you could do before.
Right. Of course. All right. So to wrap things up, I always ask what's been the most interesting book that you've read and you recommend to others?
Every time you read a book and you think it's a great book. I just recently read a book called Educated.
Yeah.
And then I read another one called, Glass Castle, very similar. Why I bring these two books is, we've all read all these books about India and Africa and other places where people are really struggling. But the fact that in our own world, what we see is beautiful grass, trees all around, there is so much of misery, so much of strife. And through that, people come up and with having no rancor to events and God. There's another beautiful book called The Girl Who Smiled Beads. If anybody hasn't read it, brilliant book. So you read and you just wake up and say, God, thank you so much for giving me so much. And the world is full of people who make things out in the most horrendously difficult circumstances, and that's the beauty of this world.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Excellent. Well, thank you. So here we had Anjan to explain 3 deep chapters of the IT industry. So from the 90s, 2000, and 2008, as we enter the 4th decade of the IT landscape. Thank you, Anjan, for joining us on the Capital Call today.
Thank you very much, Vijay. I had a great time. Thank you.
Thank